So for this class, I'm asking you to read the PDF of the letter from Columbus back to Spain after his first voyage. So in this letter, he wrote to Ralph Sanchez, who is the treasurer to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. So Columbus was writing this to kind of justify his voyages, right? He's overemphasizing the richness of what he found, overemphasizing his successes, and therefore the value of his finds and the value of his trip. So he's doing this to kind of seek the approval of higher ups and to ingratiate himself to them, right? And you can see throughout this letter, he's beginning to use many tropes and kind of rhetorical strategies that look at othering, exoticizing, and whatnot. If you read some of his logbooks as well in the first voyage, you'll see quite more of this, and we'll see it when we read his writings in the second voyage and third and fourth. He kind of loses his mind a little bit as the trips go on further. So in the letter, he discusses leaving Cadiz, which is in the south of Spain. And once he found where he was going, which, you all know is not where he originally intended to go, but tried to justify it to himself, he said in the letter that he took possession of the islands, right, for Spain, claimed them for Spain, and that they were thickly peopled, right? So there was an abundance of people, which is kind of saying to Spain, look, these are all people that we can use, right? And that he took them without resistance. So he's also trying to say, well, these were docile people. This is exactly what you want because they're going to be easy to control. And he renamed the island Wanawani, which he renamed San Salvador. And he did that, like in the renaming, that's part of the claiming it, right? They kind of put their stamp on it and say, okay, this is ours now. So also it's really interesting. And so on page 3, he discusses the inhabitants and he says, with whose inhabitants I was unable to communicate because they fled as soon as they saw us, right? And he seems so shocked that people ran away when he showed up. I mean, if you have someone come up out of the blue that you have no expectation of and who is so vastly different from yourself, of course it's terrifying. And clearly with his intentions, things would not end up well for them. He says that the houses were small but built without any regard to order. So he's comparing this to Spain and saying that, well, they're not as ordered as you would expect at home. So then he also, at different times, talks about communicating with some of the native peoples that he was able to come across or kind of captured, right? And he, I think, says that he has greater success communicating with them than he really does, right? He has no way of knowing their language and no way of truly knowing what they had to say, right? And so I think he's glossing over a few things and not recognizing why someone would be scared. He also compares the topography and flora and fauna of the island to Spain, right? So he's like, they were verdant and luxuriant as they are in Spain in the month of May, right? So this reference to home is kind of a frequent thing. And so that is his point of comparison. Then when he talks about the island of Hispaniola, he talks about the spices and gold and other metals that he found, right? He really didn't find that much, but here he's saying, yes, there's so much, because he's trying to again prove the value of what he was doing, right? So he's overemphasizing things. When describing the people, he said the inhabitants always go naked as they were born, except for a leaf, a small bough, or an apron of cotton, right? So to him, this is very exotic. And then he goes on to say, when I have sent men out to the villages to speak with the natives, that they have come out in disorderly troop and have fled in such haste as at the approach of our men, that the fathers forsook their children and the children their fathers. That people ran away and like forgot to grab their kids or forgot to grab their parents because they were so terrified, right? Like he thinks that this is kind of a sign of disorder and lack of like a refined society, but in reality this is terrifying. If you're in a terrifying emergency, of course you're not going to do things in a way that's expected of you, right? And then he mentions that he offered them goods, but they were naturally timid and fearful. Well, yeah, duh, right? How would they know what his intentions are and what he's wanting? What is he, when he's offering something, he cannot speak the language. What is he wanting in exchange? And clearly, even though he says, well, I just want to exchange things with them to create niceties, in reality, he's thinking in the long term, right? If I have these relations with them, if I'm able to control people, then they can be used for labor, right? And forced labor and slavery later on, right? And page 7, he mentions that they are very simple and honest and exceedingly liberal with all they have, right? So this is certainly exoticizing and othering and saying, wow, look at this, these people are simple, right? By oversimplifying them, this is playing into these narratives that they are not as intelligent as he is or that Europeans may be. Oh, and then page 8. He says, they bartered like idiots for cotton and gold, for fragments of bows, glasses, bottles, and jars, which I forbade as being unjust, and myself gave them many beautiful and acceptable articles, which I had brought with me, taking nothing from them in return. Right? So he's, literally calling them idiots, right? And saying they have no idea of what the value is. Well, of course not. These are items that they have not come across before, right? So they're bartering for things that are valuable to them. And he does not recognize that value. He says only what I have has value. That is centering the self. That is certainly othering, right? By saying the self is the only one who knows true value. And he then mentions wanting to convert them to Christianity, right? So not only is he on this mission of trade, but he's also looking at investing in conversion, right? So that being something that the leaders of Spain had wanted for themselves, and so he's kind of trying to accede to that as well. He then mentions on his arrival at sea, he had taken some Indians by force from the first island in order that they may learn our language and communicate to us what they know, right? So he's like, he takes people by force and forces them to be interpreters, okay? And then he says he thinks that they think he is from heaven and cry out to the others, come look at these beings of a celestial race. Now, this is a huge assumption. He does not know what they are communicating to other people. He's trying to use them also to entice other natives to come with him. And they're probably warning them to stay away, right? Or they're really scared that he might kill them, which is a very real reality. So he says that he really understands them. And how within a few hours could you understand another language? On page 13, he mentions that the natives cannot attack Spaniards because they go naked and are too cowardly. So again, othering, stating that they are too meek and mild, and that saying then that they would be very easy to overcome and easy for other colonists to come and rule, right? Then he also has an expectation of seeing cannibals. So see, even at this point, there were many narratives that exoticized others and had exoticized places that had not been traveled to or had been traveled to very infrequently, right, by explorers or tradesmen. And so these wild stories about cannibalism really ran rampant, and they were in his mind. He already pictured that he was going to encounter either really super mild people or people who were dangerous and savage and scary. totally othering, right? Totally exoticizing and saying they're to be feared. And so he's really expecting this, right? Which in reality did not happen. But he's always looking for evidence of that, right? And he said he was told on the island of Caris, which is Puerto Rico, that there were ferocious people who were reputed to be cannibals. How does he know? Again, he doesn't know. This is what he's claiming that other native people are telling him, right? So I really wonder in reading this how the native peoples of these islands might write about Columbus if they had the opportunity to. What would they say about their encounter with him and the strange man and his crew showing up out of the blue and then wanting all these things and taking people, right? And then I think he closes the letter in talking again, promising much gold and spices and cotton and mastic, right? All this trades goods. So he's saying, look, there's value in what I did. I did this great thing. You should invest in me some more, right? And he's also looking for recognition and stability for his family by having kind of a title. I think he's seeking a title as well, which is an important thing. So after reading this section, in Journal 5, don't worry about following the traditional journal guideline format. I would like you to write a letter back to Spain as if you were on this trip. And if you get a chance to read his logbook in the beginning, if you have the physical book already, please do so, because you can kind of see how he breaks that up. But write a letter to Spain either from the perspective of one of Columbus's men or one of the inhabitants of these islands that Columbus encounters, right? So describe what took place either on the journey or when Columbus arrived. Think about maybe kind of telling it from a different perspective or telling the truth that Columbus did not tell in this letter. In this letter, he's trying to present himself in a really positive light, and he's kind of supplicating himself to them and being like, oh, I'm wonderful. Look at all these great successes. It's not the truth, right?